Did you know that Family Guy was actually dead and buried for 3 entire years? And that the show you're watching today only exists because of DVD sales and something called Adult Swim? If you think you know everything about the Griffin family, you're about to discover some mind-blowing secrets that will completely change how you see this animated masterpiece. What I'm about to tell you goes way deeper than just random trivia. We're talking about hidden connections to other shows, real-world controversies that almost destroyed careers, and creative decisions that were so controversial they had to be completely rewritten. Some of these facts are so bizarre that even die-hard fans have never heard them. Let's start with something that will blow your mind. Family Guy didn't just get canceled once, it got canceled twice. But here's where it gets really interesting. The first cancellation happened after just 2 seasons because Fox executives thought the humor was too edgy and the ratings weren't strong enough. Seth MacFarlane was devastated, but he had no idea that this cancellation would actually make the show more popular than it had ever been while it was on the air. Here's what happened during those dark years. Adult Swim picked up the reruns and started airing them late at night. Something magical occurred. The show found its true audience. College students and young adults were staying up late, discovering this irreverent animated comedy that pushed every boundary imaginable. The ratings on Adult Swim were phenomenal. Meanwhile, DVD sales were going through the roof. People weren't just buying the DVDs, they were buying multiple copies to give as gifts. Fox executives started paying attention when they realized they were sitting on a gold mine. The show they had thrown away was generating more buzz and making more money in reruns than most of their current programming. This led to one of the most unprecedented decisions in television history. In 2005, Fox brought Family Guy back from the dead, making it the first canceled primetime series to be revived due to DVD sales and cable reruns. But the resurrection came with a price. Seth MacFarlane had moved on. He was working on other projects and wasn't sure he wanted to return to the world of Peter Griffin. Fox had to offer him an incredibly lucrative deal, including creative control and the promise to produce 2 additional animated series. This is how we eventually got American Dad and The Cleveland Show. Now let's talk about something that will make you see Stewie Griffin in a completely different light. The character was originally designed to be much more evil and sinister. In early episodes, Stewie was genuinely trying to kill Lois and take over the world. But something interesting happened as the show evolved. Seth MacFarlane and the writers began to soften Stewie's character, making him more of a sophisticated intellectual trapped in a baby's body rather than a genuine psychopath. This transformation wasn't accidental. MacFarlane has revealed that Stewie's character development was influenced by his own experiences and observations about childhood intelligence. The writers began to explore the idea that Stewie's apparent evil tendencies were actually the result of a brilliant mind struggling to communicate in a world that couldn't understand him. This is why later episodes show Stewie as more emotionally vulnerable and seeking connection rather than domination. Here's something that might disturb you about the show's research process. The writers of Family Guy have one of the most extensive research teams in television. They don't just make random pop culture references. Every joke, every cutaway, every cultural reference is carefully researched and fact-checked. The team maintains massive databases of information about celebrities, historical events, movies, music, and current events. This is why their parodies are so accurate and cutting. But this attention to detail has gotten them into serious trouble. The show has faced numerous lawsuits from celebrities and public figures who felt they were portrayed unfairly or inaccurately. Some of these legal battles have cost the production millions of dollars. In several cases, entire episodes had to be re-edited or pulled from circulation to avoid further legal complications. One of the most controversial moments in Family Guy history involves a joke that predicted a real tragedy. In a 2013 episode, there was a sequence involving bombs and the Boston Marathon. When the actual Boston Marathon bombing occurred just weeks after the episode aired, conspiracy theorists went crazy. They claimed the show had inside knowledge of the attack. The truth is much simpler but equally disturbing. It was a coincidence, but it highlighted how the show's edgy humor sometimes intersects with real-world events in uncomfortable ways. The production process of Family Guy is unlike any other animated show. While most animated series take months to produce each episode, Family Guy operates on an incredibly tight schedule that requires episodes to be completed in just a few weeks. This is possible because of their unique production pipeline that allows multiple episodes to be in different stages of production simultaneously. Seth MacFarlane's involvement in the show has changed dramatically over the years. While he still provides the voices for multiple characters including Peter, Brian, and Stewie, he's much less involved in the day-to-day writing and production. This transition happened gradually as MacFarlane became more interested in live-action projects and music career. Many fans don't realize that some of their favorite recent episodes were created with minimal input from the show's original creator. The voice acting process reveals some fascinating secrets about the characters. Seth MacFarlane records Peter Griffin's voice by speaking in a lower register than his natural voice, which sometimes causes strain during long recording sessions. For Stewie, he uses a combination of his natural speaking voice with a refined English accent that he developed specifically for the character. Brian's voice is actually closest to MacFarlane's real speaking voice, which is why their conversations often feel the most natural. Here's something that will change how you watch the show forever. Many of the cutaway gags that seem completely random are actually connected to larger storylines that were planned but never fully developed. The writers keep extensive notes about potential character backstories and plot developments. Sometimes these ideas surface as quick cutaway jokes instead of full episodes. This means that seemingly throwaway gags might actually be glimpses into alternative versions of the show that could have existed. The relationship between Family Guy and The Simpsons is much more complex than the surface-level rivalry that fans discuss. Behind the scenes, there's actually a great deal of mutual respect between the creative teams. Several writers and animators have worked on both shows, and there are numerous hidden references and inside jokes that acknowledge this connection. The famous crossover episode took years to develop because both teams wanted to ensure they honored each other's creative legacy. The show's impact on popular culture extends far beyond just entertainment. Family Guy has influenced internet meme culture in ways that are still being discovered. The show's rapid-fire reference style and willingness to break the fourth wall helped establish many of the comedic conventions that now dominate social media and online content. Phrases and concepts from the show have entered everyday language in ways that most people don't even realize. One of the most closely guarded secrets about Family Guy involves the process of celebrity guest appearances. The show has featured hundreds of celebrity voices over the years, but the selection process is incredibly strategic. The producers maintain detailed profiles of celebrities, including their sense of humor, willingness to make fun of themselves, and potential controversy factors. Some major stars have turned down appearances because they weren't comfortable with how they might be portrayed. The animation style of Family Guy appears simple, but it's actually incredibly sophisticated. The character designs are deliberately simplified to allow for rapid production, but the background art and scene composition often contain incredible detail that viewers miss during casual watching. The animators hide visual jokes and references in backgrounds that are only visible when episodes are paused or watched at high definition. The show's relationship with censorship has evolved dramatically over the years. Early episodes pushed boundaries that would be considered tame by today's standards, while recent episodes deal with topics that would have been completely forbidden when the show began. This evolution reflects changing cultural attitudes, but it also shows how the creative team has learned to work within and around broadcasting restrictions. Family Guy's influence on other animated shows is immeasurable. The success of its revival proved that adult animated comedies could be viable long-term properties. This directly led to the creation or continuation of shows like Rick and Morty, Bob's Burgers, and numerous others. The show essentially saved the entire genre of primetime adult animation. The merchandising empire built around Family Guy generates hundreds of millions of dollars annually, but most of this success comes from international markets rather than domestic sales. The show's humor translates surprisingly well across cultural boundaries, making it one of the most globally successful American animated properties ever created. Behind the scenes, the show operates more like a comedy writer's room than a traditional animation studio. The collaborative process involves dozens of writers, animators, and producers working together to create each episode. Ideas can come from anywhere, and the best concepts often emerge from casual conversations rather than formal brainstorming sessions. The legacy of Family Guy extends far beyond entertainment into academic study. Universities now offer courses that analyze the show's cultural impact, comedic techniques, and social commentary. The show has become a legitimate subject of scholarly research in fields ranging from media studies to sociology. As we look toward the future, Family Guy continues to evolve while maintaining the irreverent spirit that made it a cultural phenomenon. The show that once faced cancellation has become an institution, proving that sometimes the most unexpected successes come from taking creative risks and refusing to compromise your vision. Whether you love it or hate it, Family Guy has fundamentally changed television comedy forever. These hidden aspects of its creation and evolution reveal a complex, carefully crafted entertainment machine that continues to surprise and provoke audiences worldwide. The next time you watch an episode, you'll see it through completely different eyes, understanding the incredible journey that brought these characters from cancellation to global cultural dominance. Did you know that Family Guy was actually canceled twice, and that Seth MacFarlane almost died in the September 11th attacks but missed his flight because of a hangover? And that's just scratching the surface of the absolutely wild behind-the-scenes stories that most people have never heard about this iconic show. What's up, everyone, and welcome back to the channel, where we dive deep into the hidden secrets of your favorite shows. Today, we're exploring some absolutely mind-blowing Family Guy lore that even die-hard fans probably don't know about. Trust me, by the end of this video, you'll never look at Peter Griffin the same way again. But before we jump into these crazy stories, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because we're constantly dropping content about your favorite animated series that you won't find anywhere else. And if you're a true Family Guy fan, drop a chicken fight emoji in the comments right now. Let's start with something that literally changed the course of television history. Seth MacFarlane was supposed to be on American Airlines Flight 11 on September 11, 2001, the same flight that crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. The only reason he wasn't on that plane was because he had been out drinking the night before and overslept, missing his flight by just 15 minutes. MacFarlane has talked about this in interviews, describing how his travel agent called him frantically when she realized what had happened. Can you imagine how different the world of animation would be today if he had made that flight? No Family Guy revival, no American Dad, no The Orville. It's one of those sliding doors moments that completely altered entertainment history. Speaking of near-death experiences, did you know that Family Guy has been canceled not once, but twice? The show originally ran from 1999 to 2002 before Fox pulled the plug due to declining ratings. But here's where it gets interesting. The show found new life through DVD sales and reruns on Cartoon Network's Adult Swim block. The DVD sales were absolutely unprecedented for an animated series at the time. We're talking about millions of copies sold, which was unheard of for a canceled TV show. Adult Swim's late-night reruns were pulling in massive audiences, often outperforming the original Fox broadcasts. The demand became so overwhelming that Fox had no choice but to bring the show back in 2005. But the cancellation drama didn't end there. In 2007, Fox canceled the show again, this time after Season 5. Once again, fan outcry and continued strong performance in syndication forced the network's hand, and they renewed it for a 6th season. It's pretty incredible when you think about it. Family Guy might be the only show in television history to be saved by its fans twice. Now, let's talk about some character secrets that will blow your mind. Stewie Griffin's sexuality has been a topic of debate for years. But Seth MacFarlane actually revealed in interviews that Stewie was originally conceived as a completely straight character who would eventually grow up to be a normal heterosexual adult. The gay undertones that fans picked up on were never intentionally written into the character initially. However, MacFarlane later embraced the ambiguity and has said that Stewie exists in a kind of pre-sexual state where his eventual orientation is deliberately left unclear. This explains why sometimes Stewie seems attracted to women, sometimes to men, and sometimes to neither. It's a fascinating example of how a character can evolve beyond their creator's original intentions. Here's something that might surprise you about Brian Griffin. He was almost killed off permanently way before that infamous Thanksgiving episode where he actually died temporarily. In the early seasons, there were multiple discussions about removing Brian from the show entirely because some writers felt his character was becoming too preachy and unlikable. The writers experimented with making Brian more flawed and hypocritical to balance out his intellectual pretensions, which is why we see him become increasingly alcoholic and self-absorbed as the series progresses. This character development wasn't accidental. It was a deliberate attempt to make him more interesting and less of a mouthpiece for liberal talking points. Let's dive into some voice acting secrets that most people don't know about. Seth MacFarlane voices 4 main characters: Peter, Brian, Stewie, and Glenn Quagmire. Seth, but he also voices dozens of minor characters throughout the series. However, there are some characters he refuses to voice himself. For example, MacFarlane has stated that he deliberately doesn't voice any of the female characters because he believes women should voice female characters whenever possible. This is why actors like Alex Borstein voice Lois and Mila Kunis voices Meg. It's a surprisingly progressive stance for a show that often gets criticized for its treatment of female characters. Speaking of Meg, here's some dark lore about America's least favorite animated teenager. The character was originally supposed to be much more popular and central to the show's dynamic. In early concept art and scripts, Meg was portrayed as a typical popular high school girl who would serve as the voice of reason in the Griffin family. However, the writers quickly discovered that it was much funnier to make her the family scapegoat and punching bag. What started as occasional jokes about Meg being unpopular gradually evolved into the running gag where literally everyone treats her terribly. The writers have admitted that they sometimes feel bad about how mean the show is to Meg, but the jokes are just too funny to stop. Here's a piece of lore that connects to real-world tragedy. The show has made several references to Conway Twitty, the country singer, usually by cutting away to him performing full songs as a way to pad the episode runtime. These cutaway gags became a running joke about lazy writing and time filling. However, there's a darker story behind this. Conway Twitty died in 1993, years before Family Guy even existed. Seth MacFarlane has revealed that the Conway Twitty gags were actually inspired by his own father's love of the singer's music. MacFarlane's father would play Conway Twitty songs constantly when Seth was growing up, and the extended musical cutaways were a way of honoring that memory, while also poking fun at television's tendency to use musical performances as filler. Let's talk about some episodes that almost didn't make it to air. The episode titled Partial Terms of Endearment was actually banned from broadcast television entirely. The episode deals with abortion and surrogate pregnancy in typical Family Guy fashion, but the content was deemed too controversial for Fox's standards. The episode was completely finished and was supposed to air during Season 8, but Fox refused to broadcast it. It was eventually included on the DVD release and made available online, but it remains the only Family Guy episode that has never aired on television in the United States. The controversy surrounding this episode led to stricter content guidelines for the show going forward. Here's something about the show's animation that most people never notice. In the early seasons, the animation style was much more crude and simple, partly due to budget constraints, but also because of the technology available at the time. However, if you watch closely, you'll notice that the animation quality suddenly improves dramatically around Season 4. This wasn't just because of increased budget, it was because the show switched animation studios. The original episodes were animated by a small studio that specialized in low-budget television animation. When the show was revived, Fox invested in higher quality animation produced by a different studio with more advanced technology and techniques. But here's the weird part. Some fans actually prefer the cruder animation style of the early episodes. They argue that the rougher animation gave the show more character and charm. The newer episodes, while technically superior, sometimes feel too polished and corporate compared to the scrappy early seasons. Let's explore some celebrity connections that might surprise you. Patrick Stewart, who voices baby Susie Swanson, actually improvises most of his lines. The writers typically give him a basic outline of what the character needs to say, but Stewart adds his own Shakespearean flair to every line reading. Stewart has said in interviews that voicing a baby character allows him to explore comedy in ways that his serious dramatic roles don't permit. He's also revealed that he often comes up with the most outrageous and inappropriate lines for baby Susie, pushing the boundaries of what the censors will allow. Here's some lore about the show's most controversial episodes. The episode where Brian and Stewie are trapped in a bank vault together for the entire episode was actually written as a bottle episode to save money on animation and voice acting. However, it ended up becoming one of the most critically acclaimed episodes in the show's history. The writers have revealed that they were initially worried the episode would be boring since it only featured 2 characters in one location for the entire runtime. But the episode's success proved that the show worked best when it focused on character development and dialogue rather than just rapid-fire jokes and cutaway gags. Speaking of experimental episodes, did you know that the show has done several episodes that exist in alternate universes or different time periods? These aren't just random creative choices. They're actually part of a larger multiverse concept that the writers have been quietly building throughout the series. The writers have hinted that all of these alternate reality episodes are connected, and that there's a larger mythology about parallel dimensions that runs throughout the show. Most fans don't pick up on these connections because they're subtle and spread across multiple seasons, but dedicated viewers have started mapping out the multiverse timeline. Here's something about the show's music that most people don't realize. Seth MacFarlane is actually a trained singer and musician who has released several albums of standards and jazz music. Many of the musical numbers in Family Guy feature MacFarlane's actual singing voice, not just his character voices. MacFarlane has said that he uses Family Guy as a way to showcase different musical styles and pay homage to classic American songwriting. Some of the show's most elaborate musical sequences were specifically designed to highlight MacFarlane's vocal abilities and his love of traditional pop music. But here's the interesting part. MacFarlane has also revealed that he sometimes writes entire episodes around songs he wants to perform. The plot becomes secondary to the musical numbers, which explains why some episodes feel like they're structured more like variety shows than traditional sitcoms. Let's talk about some behind-the-scenes drama that most fans don't know about. There have been several major conflicts between the voice actors over the years, particularly regarding salary negotiations and creative control. The most significant dispute involved Mila Kunis, who voices Meg. During Season 7, there were reports that Kunis was considering leaving the show due to disagreements about her character's treatment and her compensation compared to other cast members. The situation was eventually resolved, but it led to changes in how Meg was written in subsequent seasons. Here's some dark lore about the show's influence on real-world events. Several episodes of Family Guy have been accused of predicting or inspiring real-world tragedies. The most notable example is an Innuendo episode that aired before the Boston Marathon bombing that featured Peter accidentally detonating bombs in Boston. The episode was pulled from reruns and streaming services after the bombing, and some conspiracy theorists claimed that the show somehow predicted the attack. Seth MacFarlane has addressed these claims, explaining that they're purely coincidental and that the show's writers don't have any special knowledge of future events. However, this incident led to increased scrutiny of the show's content and more careful consideration of how certain jokes and storylines might be interpreted in different contexts. Here's something about the show's international versions that might surprise you. Family Guy has been adapted for television in several different countries, and each version makes significant changes to accommodate local culture and censorship standards. The most interesting adaptation is probably the Arabic version, which removes all alcohol references, changes Brian from a dog to a cat, and significantly tones down the sexual humor. These changes are so extensive that the show becomes almost unrecognizable compared to the American version. As we wrap up this deep dive into Family Guy lore, it's clear that there's so much more to this show than meets the eye. From near-death experiences that changed television history to hidden multiverses and banned episodes, Family Guy has one of the richest and most complex backstories in animated television. These behind-the-scenes stories remind us that even our favorite comedies have real human drama and complexity behind them. The next time you watch Family Guy, you'll hopefully have a new appreciation for all the creative decisions, controversies, and coincidences that shape the show we know today. If you enjoyed learning about these hidden Family Guy secrets, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into your favorite shows. What other animated series would you like us to explore? Next, let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next video, where we uncover even more secrets from the world of animation. Did you know that Family Guy was actually dead and buried for 3 entire years? And when it came back from the grave, it changed television forever in ways you probably never realized? Stick around, because what I'm about to tell you about the hidden depths of Family Guy will completely change how you see this seemingly simple cartoon. Most people think Family Guy is just random jokes and cutaway gags. But there's a secret layer of storytelling, hidden references, and behind-the-scenes drama that would make your head spin. From secret government conspiracies to real-world tragedies that shaped entire episodes, this show has more dark secrets than you might imagine. Let's start with something that sounds like a conspiracy theory but is absolutely true. Family Guy predicted major world events with scary accuracy. And I'm not talking about lucky guesses. We're talking about specific details that aired months or even years before they actually happened in real life. Remember the episode where Peter accidentally damages a bridge? That episode aired in 2005, showing a bridge collapse in remarkable detail. Less than 2 years later, the Minneapolis bridge collapse happened in almost identical circumstances. Coincidence? Maybe. But wait, there's more. The show also depicted airport security scenarios that became reality after major policy changes. Episodes showing specific security procedures aired before those exact procedures were implemented in real airports. Either Seth MacFarlane is a time traveler, or the writers were paying very close attention to patterns most people missed. But here's where it gets really weird. The show once depicted a very specific type of terrorist attack involving planes, and this aired before certain real-world events that I can't get too detailed about without this video getting demonetized. The point is, Family Guy wasn't just making random jokes about current events. They were somehow tapping into the collective unconscious of what was coming next. Now let's talk about the show's death and resurrection, because this story is wilder than any episode plot. Family Guy was canceled in 2002 after just 3 seasons. Fox executives thought it was done forever, but here's what they didn't expect. The DVD sales went absolutely insane. People were buying Family Guy DVDs like crazy, and more importantly, Adult Swim started running reruns that pulled in massive ratings. Fox realized they had made a huge mistake. The show wasn't just popular. It was building a cult following that was growing stronger every day it was off the air. When Family Guy came back in 2005, something had fundamentally changed. The writers knew they had been given a second chance, and they went absolutely wild with it. The humor got darker, the references got more obscure, and they started breaking the fourth wall in ways that no animated show had ever done before. But here's the part that most fans don't know. The cancellation and resurrection created a split personality within the show itself. There's pre-cancellation Family Guy and post-cancellation Family Guy, and they're almost like 2 different shows entirely. Pre-cancellation Family Guy was more grounded. Sure, it was weird, but the characters felt like real people with real problems. Post-cancellation Family Guy became something else entirely. It became a commentary on television itself. A show that was constantly aware it was a show. This shift created what television historians now call the meta-revolution. Family Guy showed other animated shows that you could break every rule, reference your own existence, and make fun of the very network that pays you and still be successful. South Park, Rick and Morty, and countless other shows followed this blueprint. Speaking of breaking rules, let's talk about the episodes that almost didn't make it to air. There's a whole vault of Family Guy content that was deemed too controversial, too dark, or too legally problematic to broadcast. Some of these episodes have become legendary among fans who have never seen them. One infamous episode dealt with a real-world tragedy in such a specific way that it would have caused massive backlash. The episode was fully animated, voiced, and scored, but it was pulled at the last minute. Only a handful of people have ever seen it, and they're bound by non-disclosure agreements. Another banned episode featured a storyline that involved real political figures in scenarios that would have caused international incidents. The legal department shut it down so hard that even mentioning specific details could result in lawsuits. But here's what's fascinating about these banned episodes. They showed just how far Seth MacFarlane and his team were willing to push boundaries. They weren't just making a cartoon. They were conducting social experiments to see what society would tolerate. This brings us to one of the most interesting aspects of Family Guy lore: the show's relationship with censorship and standards. Every episode that makes it to air represents hundreds of battles fought behind the scenes between the writers and network executives. The writers developed an elaborate system for getting controversial content past the censors. They would intentionally include material they knew would be rejected, so that when they fought to keep the stuff they really wanted, it would seem reasonable by comparison. It's psychological warfare disguised as comedy writing. This strategy works so well that other shows started copying it. The Family Guy approach to dealing with censorship became the industry standard for pushing boundaries on television. Now let's dive into the character origins, because the backstories of these characters are way darker and more complex than you'd expect from a comedy show. Peter Griffin wasn't always the lovable idiot we know today. In early concept art and scripts, he was genuinely disturbing, almost psychopathic in his behavior. The writers had to gradually soften Peter's character because test audiences found him genuinely unlikable. But traces of that original darker Peter still show up in certain episodes, creating this weird cognitive dissonance where you're laughing at someone who, if you really think about it, should probably be in prison. Stewie's character evolution is even more interesting. He was originally conceived as a pure villain, a baby bent on world domination with no redeeming qualities. But as the show progressed, the writers started exploring what would make a baby want to destroy everything, and they discovered something profound about childhood trauma and family dynamics. The gradual softening of Stewie from villain to complex character represents one of the most sophisticated character development arcs in television comedy. But it happened so slowly that most viewers didn't even notice it was happening. Brian's character might be the most tragic of all. He represents the writer's own struggles with depression, alcoholism, and the feeling of being trapped in a life that doesn't match your dreams. Every time Brian has an existential crisis, it's the writers working through their own psychological issues on screen. This is why Brian's temporary death hit fans so hard. It wasn't just killing off a character, it was the writers symbolically killing off the part of themselves that they saw in Brian. When they brought him back, it represented their own decision to keep fighting through depression and creative frustration. The show's relationship with its own success is another layer of complexity that most fans miss. Family Guy became so popular that it started influencing real-world culture, but this success created a feedback loop that began changing the show itself. References to Family Guy started showing up in other TV shows, movies, and even news broadcasts. Politicians started making Family Guy references in speeches. The show went from commenting on culture to actually shaping culture, and this shift is reflected in the later seasons. The writers became increasingly aware that they were creating cultural touchstones, and this awareness changed how they approached comedy. Jokes that might have been throwaway gags in early seasons became carefully crafted cultural commentary in later seasons. This evolution created what media scholars call the recursive effect, where a piece of media becomes so influential that it starts commenting on its own influence. Family Guy didn't just break the fourth wall, it demolished the entire theater. Let's talk about the real-world consequences of Family Guy's cultural impact. The show has been credited with changing how people communicate, particularly in how they use pop culture references in everyday conversation. Before Family Guy, pop culture references in conversation were usually recent and obvious. After Family Guy, people started making increasingly obscure references, creating entire conversations that were essentially elaborate chains of cultural callbacks. This changed how humor works in social situations. The show also influenced how other media uses cutaway gags and non sequiturs. Everything from commercials to political campaigns started using Family Guy-style random humor to grab attention and create memorable moments. But perhaps the most significant impact was on censorship standards across all media. Family Guy pushed boundaries so consistently and successfully that it expanded what was considered acceptable on television. Shows that came after could go places that wouldn't have been possible before Family Guy paved the way. The voice acting in Family Guy deserves its own deep dive because there are layers of performance art happening that most people completely miss. Seth MacFarlane doesn't just voice multiple characters. He creates distinct psychological profiles for each voice that reflect different aspects of his own personality. Peter represents 10. MacFarlane's id, his impulse-driven, consequence-ignoring side. Brian represents his superego, his intellectual, morally concerned side. Stewie represents his ego, his ambitious, attention-seeking side. The show is essentially one person having a conversation with different aspects of himself. This psychological complexity extends to the guest voices as well. When celebrities appear on Family Guy, they're not just doing celebrity cameos. They're being integrated into this complex psychological ecosystem that MacFarlane has created. The show's approach to celebrity culture is particularly sophisticated. Rather than just making fun of celebrities, Family Guy examines the psychological impact of fame on both celebrities and the people who consume celebrity culture. This brings us to one of the most overlooked aspects of Family Guy, its commentary on media consumption itself. The show constantly references other TV shows, movies, and cultural phenomena, but it's not just making references for the sake of references. Each reference serves as a commentary on how media shapes our understanding of reality. When Peter acts out scenes from movies, he's demonstrating how deeply fictional narratives penetrate real human behavior. When the show parodies other TV shows, it's examining how different formats and styles influence how we process information. The cutaway gags aren't random interruptions. They're demonstrations of how the human mind actually works. We don't think in linear narratives. We think in associations, tangents, and random connections. Family Guy mirrors the actual structure of human consciousness. This psychological accuracy is why the show resonates so deeply with audiences. It's not just funny, it's cognitively familiar. The chaos of Family Guy matches the chaos of our own internal mental experience. The show's treatment of social issues is another area where there's more depth than meets the eye. While Family Guy often appears to make jokes at the expense of sensitive topics, careful analysis reveals a more complex approach to social commentary. The show uses humor to make serious points more palatable, but it also uses humor to expose the absurdity of certain social attitudes. When characters make prejudiced statements, they're usually portrayed as idiotic or ignorant, effectively undermining the attitudes they're expressing. This technique allows the show to address controversial topics without preaching, but it also creates ambiguity about what the show actually believes. This ambiguity is intentional, forcing viewers to think critically about the issues being presented rather than passively accepting predetermined conclusions. As we wrap up this exploration of Family Guy's hidden depths, it's worth considering what this all means for the future of comedy in television. Family Guy didn't just entertain audiences. It fundamentally changed what television could be and do. The show proved that audiences were hungry for more complex, self-aware entertainment that challenged traditional narrative structures. It demonstrated that comedy could be a vehicle for serious psychological and social exploration without losing its entertainment value. Most importantly, Family Guy showed that taking creative risks, even when they result in cancellation, can ultimately lead to greater success than playing it safe. The show's death and resurrection became a template for how creative properties can find new life through changing audience behaviors and consumption patterns. So the next time you watch Family Guy, remember that you're not just watching a cartoon about a dysfunctional family. You're watching a sophisticated piece of media art that changed television forever, influenced how we communicate with each other, and continues to push boundaries in ways that most viewers never fully appreciate. The real genius of Family Guy isn't in any single joke or episode. It's in how it managed to hide all this complexity behind what appears to be simple, silly humor. That's the ultimate magic trick, and it's still working after all these years. Have you ever wondered what goes on behind the scenes of your favorite animated shows while you're drifting off to sleep? Tonight, we're diving into the fascinating world of Family Guy with some incredibly random facts that might just surprise you. So, grab your blanket, get comfortable, and let's explore the weird and wonderful universe of the Griffin family. Did you know that Family Guy wasn't originally supposed to be called Family Guy at all? Seth MacFarlane's original pitch to Fox was titled The Life of Larry, which was actually a 7-minute short film he created while studying at the Rhode Island School of Design. The executives liked it so much that they asked him to develop it into a full series, but they wanted a catchier name. After going through dozens of potential titles, they settled on Family Guy because it perfectly captured the show's essence of an average American family dealing with extraordinary situations. Speaking of Seth MacFarlane, here's something that might keep you up at night thinking about alternate timelines. MacFarlane was originally scheduled to be on American Airlines Flight 11 on September 11, 2001. He was supposed to fly from Boston to Los Angeles that morning, but he overslept and missed the flight by just 15 minutes. That flight was one of the planes that hit the World Trade Center. If he had made that flight, we might never have gotten Family Guy, American Dad, or The Orville. Sometimes, the smallest moments change everything. Now let's talk about the voices behind your favorite characters. You probably know that Seth MacFarlane voices Peter, Brian, and Stewie, but did you know he also voices Carter Pewterschmidt, Tom Tucker, and even Glenn Quagmire? That's right. The same person who voices the intellectual dog Brian also creates Quagmire's distinctive giggity giggity catchphrase. MacFarlane developed these voices during his college years, often entertaining friends at parties with his impressions and original character voices. Here's a random fact about Stewie that might surprise you. His distinctive football-shaped head wasn't originally part of his design. The animators were struggling with how to make a baby character visually interesting and memorable. During one late-night brainstorming session, someone jokingly suggested making his head shaped like a football, and everyone laughed. But the more they thought about it, the more it made sense. The unusual head shape would make Stewie instantly recognizable and add to his alien-like otherworldly intelligence. Sometimes the best ideas come from the most unexpected places. The character of Meg Griffin has an interesting backstory that goes beyond what we see on screen. Originally, Meg was supposed to be the breakout character of the show. The writers envisioned her as the relatable teenager that audiences would connect with most. However, as the show evolved, they realized that making Meg the constant target of the family's jokes created much funnier dynamics. This shift happened gradually over the first few seasons, and by season 3, Meg's role as the family punching bag was firmly established. Did you know that Family Guy holds several Guinness World Records? One of the most interesting is for the longest gap between a TV show's cancellation and its return to production. Family Guy was canceled in 2002 after 3 seasons, but DVD sales and reruns on Adult Swim proved so popular that Fox brought it back in 2005. That's a 3-year gap, which was unprecedented at the time for an animated series. The famous chicken fight scenes between Peter and Ernie the Giant Chicken have their own fascinating history. The first fight appeared in the episode Da Boom and was originally intended to be a one-off gag. However, the animators had so much fun creating the elaborate fight sequence that they decided to make it a recurring element. Each subsequent chicken fight became more elaborate and destructive, with the animators treating them almost like action movie sequences. The fights have destroyed everything from fast food restaurants to airports, and the animation team spends months planning each new encounter. Here's something that might surprise you about the show's animation process. Each episode of Family Guy takes approximately 8 months to complete from start to finish. The process begins with a writer's room, where scripts are developed and refined. Then comes voice recording, which can take several weeks, as actors often record their lines separately. After that, the storyboard artists create rough sketches of every scene, followed by the actual animation process, which involves hundreds of individual drawings for just a few minutes of screen time. The character of Cleveland Brown was almost written off the show much earlier than his eventual departure for The Cleveland Show. During Season 2, the writers were struggling with what to do with Cleveland's character, feeling like he didn't have enough distinct personality traits to warrant significant screen time. However, voice actor Mike Henry brought such warmth and humor to the role that the writers decided to develop Cleveland further, eventually giving him his own spin-off series. One of the most random facts about Family Guy involves the show's relationship with real-world events. The writers have an unusual policy about incorporating current events into episodes. Because of the long production timeline, they rarely reference events that happened less than 8 months before an episode airs. This has led to some interesting anachronisms, where characters will reference old news as if it just happened, creating an odd time bubble effect that longtime viewers have learned to expect. The character of Brian Griffin represents one of the most complex writing challenges in the show. Creating a talking dog who serves as the voice of reason while still maintaining dog-like characteristics requires a delicate balance. The writers often debate how much human intelligence to give Brian versus when to remind audiences that he's still fundamentally a dog. This internal contradiction has led to some of the show's most interesting character development moments. Did you know that several celebrities have refused to appear on Family Guy due to its controversial content? However, many others have embraced the show's irreverent humor. Adam West, who played the mayor of Quahog, loved his portrayal so much that he considered his Family Guy character to be his favorite role later in his career. West appreciated how the show exaggerated his public persona while still showing genuine affection for his Batman legacy. The Griffin family house has its own interesting design history. The animators based the house's exterior on a real home in Cranston, Rhode Island, not far from where Seth MacFarlane grew up. However, the interior layout was designed to be deliberately confusing and inconsistent. Rooms appear and disappear between episodes, and the house seems to have impossible spatial relationships. This was an intentional choice by the animators, who felt that a realistic house layout would be too limiting for the show's surreal storylines. Here's a fact that might surprise animation fans. Family Guy was one of the first animated shows to extensively use computer-generated imagery mixed with traditional animation. While the characters are still hand-drawn, many background elements, vehicles, and special effects are created using CGI. This hybrid approach allows for more dynamic camera movements and elaborate action sequences while maintaining the classic cartoon aesthetic that fans love. The show's famous cutaway gags have their own unique writing process. The writers maintain a separate document called the Cutaway Bible, which contains hundreds of potential cutaway ideas organized by category. When writing an episode, they can quickly reference this document to find gags that fit the moment. Some cutaways have been in this document for years before finding the right episode to appear in. Quagmire's character design underwent significant changes during the show's early development. Originally, he was going to be much older and was designed to look more like a stereotypical dirty old man. However, the animators felt this made him too creepy and unsympathetic. They gradually made him younger and more cartoonish, which allowed them to push his character's outrageous behavior further while keeping him somewhat likable. The voice of Stewie Griffin required Seth MacFarlane to develop a unique vocal technique. To create Stewie's distinctive British accent and sophisticated vocabulary, MacFarlane studied recordings of Rex Harrison, particularly his performance in My Fair Lady. He then combined this with elements of Thurston Howell III from Gilligan's Island to create Stewie's pompous, intellectual tone. MacFarlane has said that Stewie is the most physically demanding character for him to voice, often leaving recording sessions with a sore throat. One of the strangest production facts about Family Guy involves the show's approach to celebrity deaths. The writers maintain a file of pre-written jokes about various celebrities, organized by age and health status. This allows them to quickly produce episodes that reference celebrity deaths without seeming exploitative or rushed. However, they've occasionally had to scrap entire episodes when celebrities they'd written jokes about outlived expectations. The character of Joe Swanson was inspired by a real person that Seth MacFarlane knew in college. Joe's positive attitude, despite his disability, was based on a classmate who had been paralyzed in a skiing accident, but remained one of the most optimistic people MacFarlane had ever met. The writers take Joe's character seriously, often consulting with disability advocacy groups to ensure their portrayal is respectful, while still allowing for commentemporation of varioe. The show's trademark humor. Did you know that Family Guy has influenced real-world language? Several phrases from the show have entered common usage, including "giggity, shut up, Meg," and "whose leg do you have to hump to get a dry martini around here?" Linguists have noted that the show's impact on casual speech patterns, particularly among younger viewers, has been surprisingly significant for an animated comedy. The show's musical numbers require a completely different production process than regular episodes. Seth MacFarlane, who has a background in musical theater, often writes the songs himself. The production team includes professional musicians and choreographers who help design the elaborate musical sequences. Some of the show's musical episodes have taken over a year to complete, with the songs recorded by full orchestras in professional studios. Here's something that might surprise you about the show's international versions. Family Guy is broadcast in over 50 countries, and many jokes are completely rewritten for different cultures. The German version, for example, changes many of the pop culture references to focus on German celebrities and historical events. The process of adapting the show for international audiences often requires rewriting entire scenes while maintaining the same comedic timing. The character of Death, who appears occasionally throughout the series, was almost given his own spin-off show. The concept would have followed Death as he went about his daily job of collecting souls, with each episode featuring guest appearances by Family Guy characters. The idea was shelved when the writers realized it would be too dark for the show's target demographic, but elements of the concept occasionally appear in Death's appearances on the main show. Family Guy's production team includes several former Disney animators who brought traditional animation techniques to the show's more elaborate sequences. This blend of old-school animation craftsmanship with modern computer technology gives Family Guy a unique visual style that sets it apart from other animated comedies. The animators often hide small details and Easter eggs in background scenes that only dedicated fans notice. The show's approach to time and continuity is deliberately inconsistent, but there's actually a method to the madness. The writers maintain what they call a flexible timeline, where characters can age or remain the same age depending on what serves the story best. This allows them to explore different aspects of characters without being locked into strict chronological progression. One final random fact to end our journey through the world of Family Guy. The show's theme song was originally much longer and included additional verses about each family member. The shortened version we know today was created for time constraints, but the full version occasionally appears in special episodes or DVD extras. Seth MacFarlane has mentioned that he'd love to do an entire episode featuring just the complete theme song with elaborate visuals for each verse. As we wrap up our exploration of these random Family Guy facts, remember that behind every animated comedy lies countless hours of creativity, planning, and attention to detail. Whether you're a longtime fan or just discovering the show, these behind-the-scenes glimpses reveal the incredible amount of work that goes into creating our favorite animated families. Sweet dreams. And maybe you'll dream of cutaway gags and chicken fights tonight. Until next time, keep exploring the fascinating worlds hidden within your favorite shows. Picture this. You're settling in for a cozy night, getting ready to drift off into dreamland, but instead of counting sheep, how about we count some truly wild facts about one of television's most unpredictable animated families? Tonight, we're diving deep into the bizarre, hilarious, and surprisingly intricate world of Family Guy, and trust me, by the end of this journey, you'll have enough random trivia rattling around in your brain to either help you fall asleep or keep you up all night wondering how Seth MacFarlane's mind works. Let's start with something that might surprise you about the show's origins. Family Guy almost never existed in the form we know today. Back in the late 90s, Seth MacFarlane was working at Hanna-Barbera, the legendary animation studio behind classics like The Flintstones and The Jetsons. He created a short film called The Life of Larry for his thesis project at the Rhode Island School of Design, which featured many of the characters who would eventually become the Griffin family. The short was so impressive that it caught the attention of Fox executives, but here's where it gets interesting. MacFarlane was only 24 years old when he pitched the show, making him one of the youngest creators in television history to get a primetime animated series greenlit. The original concept was quite different from what we see today. Peter Griffin was initially going to be much more of a traditional sitcom dad. Think more like Homer Simpson, but without the yellow skin. The character's personality evolved significantly during the development process, becoming the lovably obnoxious and often controversial figure we know now. MacFarlane has mentioned in interviews that he drew inspiration from his own father's mannerisms and speech patterns, particularly the distinctive Rhode Island accent that Peter sports throughout the series. Here's a fact that might make you appreciate the show's complexity a bit more surface. The average Family Guy episode contains over 300 individual drawings. Each 22-minute episode requires thousands of hours of work from dozens of artists, animators, and voice actors. The animation process alone takes approximately 8 months from initial script to final product, which explains why the show's production schedule is so carefully planned out years in advance. Speaking of voice acting, Seth MacFarlane performs the voices of four main characters: Peter, Brian, Stewie, and Glenn Quagmire. But here's something that might blow your mind. He records all of their dialogue separately, often having conversations with himself that last for hours. MacFarlane has described the experience as somewhat surreal, especially when he's voicing emotional scenes between characters like Brian and Stewie, who have some of the most complex relationships on the show. The character of Stewie Griffin deserves special attention because his development represents one of the most dramatic character evolution arcs in animated television history. Originally conceived as a straightforward villain baby bent on world domination and matricide, Stewie gradually transformed into a more nuanced character, exploring themes of sexuality, intelligence, and family dynamics. The shift was so gradual that many viewers didn't notice it happening over the course of several seasons. MacFarlane has stated that this evolution was intentional, reflecting his own growth as a writer and his desire to explore more sophisticated storytelling within the animated comedy format. One of the most fascinating aspects of Family Guy's production involves their approach to cutaway gags, those random tangential moments that have become the show's signature. The writers maintain what they call a gag bank, which is essentially a massive database of potential cutaway ideas that they can draw from when constructing episodes. Some of these gags were written years before they actually appeared on screen, waiting for the right episode and context to make them work. The process of selecting which gags make it into episodes involves multiple rounds of testing and refinement, with the writers constantly evaluating whether a particular joke will land with audiences or fall flat. The show's relationship with controversy has been both a blessing and a curse throughout its run. Family Guy has been canceled twice by Fox, first in 2002 after 3 seasons, and then brought back in 2005 due to strong DVD sales and reruns on Adult Swim. The second cancellation never actually happened, but the show came close several times due to various controversies and ratings fluctuations. What's interesting is that many of the episodes that generated the most controversy also ended up being some of the most popular, suggesting that the show's willingness to push boundaries is intrinsically linked to its success. The voice acting ensemble deserves recognition for their incredible consistency and chemistry. Alex Borstein, who voices Lois, actually auditioned for the role while she was performing in the sketch comedy group MAD-TV. Her distinctive voice for Lois was inspired by her own grandmother, and she's mentioned that she sometimes forgets she's not using her natural speaking voice when recording Lois scenes. Mila Kunis, who voices Meg, was only 14 years old when she started on the show, making her one of the youngest voice actors to land a major role in prime-time animation. The show's musical elements often go unnoticed, but they represent a significant portion of the production effort. Family Guy features more original music than most animated series, with MacFarlane himself composing many of the songs and musical numbers. His background in musical theater strongly influences these segments, and many episodes feature elaborate musical sequences that require additional voice actors, musicians, and extended animation sequences. The episode Road to the Multiverse alone featured over 40 different animation styles and required nearly double the typical production time. Here's something that might surprise fans of the show's seemingly random humor. Family Guy episodes are actually meticulously structured according to classical comedy writing principles. Each episode follows a 3-act structure with carefully planned pacing and timing. The cutaway gags aren't randomly inserted. They're strategically placed to provide relief from main plot tension or to enhance particular jokes. The writers spend considerable time in the editing process, adjusting the timing of these elements to maximize comedic impact. The show's impact on popular culture extends far beyond television. Family Guy has spawned countless internet memes, influenced other animated series, and even affected the way people communicate online. Phrases like, "Oh my God, who the hell cares?" and "What the deuce?" have entered common usage, and the show's irreverent style has influenced everything from advertising to political commentary. The series has also been credited with helping to revive interest in animated comedy among adult audiences, paving the way for shows like Rick and Morty and BoJack Horseman. One of the most technically impressive aspects of Family Guy involves their approach to celebrity impressions and guest voices. The show has featured hundreds of celebrity guest stars over the years, but what's remarkable is how they integrate these appearances into the show's established comic rhythm. Many celebrities have mentioned that recording for Family Guy requires a different approach than traditional voice acting because the timing and delivery style is so specific to the show's aesthetic. The international versions of Family Guy present fascinating variations on the original concept. In different countries, certain cultural references are modified or replaced entirely to make sense to local audiences. The German version, for example, includes completely different cutaway gags that reference German culture and history. These adaptations require not just translation but complete rewriting of significant portions of episodes, essentially creating parallel versions of the same show. Behind the scenes, the Family Guy writing room operates more like a comedy club than a traditional television writing environment. Writers regularly perform their ideas for each other, and the collaborative process involves a lot of improvisation and spontaneous joke development. MacFarlane has described the experience as one of the most creatively fulfilling aspects of producing the show, and many writers who have worked on Family Guy have gone on to create their own successful comedy series. The show's approach to social commentary often flies under the radar because it's wrapped in such outrageous humor. Many episodes tackle serious subjects like politics, religion, and social justice, but they do so through such an absurdist lens that the commentary becomes almost subliminal. This technique allows the show to address controversial topics while maintaining its primarily comedic focus, though it also means that viewers can interpret the show's messages in wildly different ways. Family Guy's influence on animation technology shouldn't be overlooked either. The show was among the first animated series to extensively use digital animation techniques, and their production pipeline has been studied and emulated by animation studios worldwide. The efficiency of their animation process allows them to produce episodes more quickly than many competing shows, which is part of why they've been able to maintain such a consistent release schedule for so many years. The merchandising empire surrounding Family Guy represents another fascinating aspect of the show's cultural impact. From action figures to clothing lines to video games, the show has spawned a massive array of consumer products. What's interesting is how these products often feature jokes and dusgly references that only hardcore fans would understand, creating multiple tiers of engagement with the show's content. The show's relationship with censorship provides insight into how television content standards have evolved over the past 2 decades. Early episodes of Family Guy pushed boundaries that were considered quite shocking at the time, but many of those same jokes would barely register as controversial today. The series has served as a kind of barometer for changing social attitudes about humor, language, and acceptable content on television. Looking at Family Guy's longevity, it's remarkable that a show built around such seemingly random humor has maintained relevance for over 2 decades. Part of this success stems from the flexibility of the format, in the end, because the show isn't tied to realistic character development or consistent continuity. It can adapt to changing cultural contexts much more easily than traditional sitcoms. Characters can be completely different from episode to episode without breaking the show's internal logic. The voice recording process for Family Guy involves some unique challenges that most animated shows don't face. Because so many characters are voiced by the same actors, recording sessions often require complex scheduling to allow for quick character switches. MacFarlane, in particular, has developed techniques for rapidly shifting between his different character voices, sometimes switching between Peter and Brian mid-sentence during recording sessions. Family Guy's impact on comedy writing extends beyond animation into live-action television and film. Many comedy writers cite the show's fearless approach to offensive humor and its willingness to commit fully to absurd premises as influential in their own work. The show's success proved that audiences were hungry for comedy that didn't follow traditional rules about likability or moral messaging. The technical aspects of producing Family Guy's signature visual style involve more complexity than might be immediately apparent. The seemingly simple character designs actually require precise consistency across hundreds of artists working on each episode. The show maintains detailed style guides that specify everything from the exact curve of Peter's chin to the precise shade of Brian's fur, ensuring visual continuity across different animation teams and production facilities. As we wind down this journey through the wonderfully weird world of Family Guy, it's worth noting that the show continues to evolve and surprise audiences after more than 20 years on the air. Whether you love it or hate it, there's no denying that Family Guy has carved out a unique place in television history, pushing boundaries and challenging expectations in ways that few shows ever attempt. So, there you have it, a deep dive into the bizarre, brilliant, and sometimes bewildering universe of Family Guy. From its humble beginnings as a college thesis project to its status as one of the longest-running animated series in television history, the show represents a fascinating case study in how unconventional creativity can find mainstream success. Sweet dreams. And remember, in the world of Family Guy, literally anything can happen, and usually does. Ever find yourself tossing and turning at night, your brain buzzing with random thoughts? Well, tonight we're diving into something that'll either put you right to sleep or keep you awake with fascinating tidbits about one of television's most controversial animated families. Get comfortable, dim those lights, and let me share some incredibly random Family Guy facts that'll drift through your mind like counting sheep. Picture this. It's 1999, and television is about to change forever. A brand new animated show is about to premiere that would become one of the most talked about series in entertainment history. But here's something most people don't know. Family Guy almost never happened at all. The pilot episode was actually rejected multiple times before finally getting picked up. Seth MacFarlane had to fight tooth and nail just to get his vision on screen, and even then, the network executives weren't entirely convinced it would work. Speaking of Seth MacFarlane, here's a mind-blowing fact that might surprise you. He was originally supposed to be on one of the planes that hit the World Trade Center on September 11th, 2001. He had a ticket for American Airlines Flight 11, but he missed the flight because he was hungover from a party the night before, and his travel agent had given him the wrong departure time. That hangover quite literally saved his life and allowed him to continue creating the show we know today. It's one of those sliding door moments that makes you think about how different television history could have been. Now, let's talk about something that'll really mess with your head. You know Brian Griffin, the intellectual talking dog? Well, his character was almost completely different. In the original concept, Brian was going to be much more dog-like, basically just a regular pet who occasionally made witty observations. But MacFarlane decided to make him more human-like because he wanted a character who could serve as the voice of reason in the Quapling, chaotic Griffin household. This decision fundamentally changed the entire dynamic of the show. Here's another random tidbit that might drift you off to dreamland. The famous chicken fights between Peter and Ernie the Giant Chicken weren't originally planned to become recurring segments. The first chicken fight was just supposed to be a one-off gag in Season 2. But the animators had so much fun creating the elaborate fight sequence that they decided to bring it back again and again. These fights became so popular that they're now considered one of the show's signature elements, even though they started as basically an inside joke among the production team. You know those cutaway gags that Family Guy is famous for? The ones that start with, "This is worse than that time when," or "Remember when?" Well, here's something fascinating about how they came to be. MacFarlane got the idea from old variety shows and comedy sketches he watched as a kid. He wanted to create something that felt like channel surfing, where you'd suddenly jump to a completely different scene or time period without warning. The writing team actually keeps a massive database of potential cutaway gags, and they have hundreds of unused ideas just sitting there waiting for the right episode. Let me tell you about something that happened during the show's darkest period. When Family Guy was canceled in 2002 after just 3 seasons, something unprecedented occurred. The show's reruns on Adult Swim became so popular that they actually brought in higher ratings than most news shows on primetime television. This had never happened before in television history. A canceled show was literally outperforming current programming just through reruns. The DVD sales were breaking records too, which ultimately convinced Fox to bring the show back from the dead. This revival made Family Guy one of the first major television shows to be brought back purely because of fan demand and aftermarket success. It changed how networks think about canceled shows and basically created the template for how fan campaigns could save their favorite programs. Pretty remarkable when you think about how social media wasn't even a factor back then. This was all done through word of mouth, online forums, and DVD purchases. Here's a random fact about Stewie Griffin that might surprise you. His distinctive football-shaped head wasn't originally designed that way. The early character sketches showed him with a more traditionally round baby head. But MacFarlane kept adjusting the proportions, making the head more and more elongated because he thought it made Stewie look more sinister and alien-like. The final design was actually inspired by the shape of a rugby ball, which McFarlane thought gave Stewie a more intellectual, almost extraterrestrial appearance. Speaking of Stewie, his accent is another interesting story. McFarlane originally performed the character with a standard American accent, but during recording sessions, he started experimenting with different voices. The posh British accent that became Stewie's trademark was actually inspired by Rex Harrison's performance as Professor Higgins in My Fair Lady. McFarlane thought the sophisticated accent would create a funny contrast with Stewie being just a baby, and it became one of the character's most distinctive features. Now here's something that'll really blow your mind about the show's production process. Each episode of Family Guy takes approximately 8 to 10 months to complete from start to finish. That means the episodes you're watching tonight were actually being worked on almost a year ago. The animation process is incredibly complex, with each episode requiring hundreds of individual drawings and countless hours of voice work, sound design, and editing. It's like a massive assembly line that never stops moving. The voice acting sessions are pretty fascinating too. Unlike many animated shows where actors record their Borges lines separately, the Family Guy cast often records together in the same room. This creates more natural conversations and allows the actors to play off each other's energy. Seth MacFarlane voices 4 main characters, Peter, Brian, Stewie, and Quagmire, and he often has to have conversations with himself, switching between voices mid-sentence. The other actors say it's both impressive and slightly disturbing to watch. Here's a random detail about the show's animation style. The characters are deliberately drawn with simple, clean lines because McFarlane wanted them to be easy to animate quickly. This was partly a practical decision. More complex designs would have made production much more expensive and time-consuming. But it also gave the show a distinctive look that set it apart from more detailed animations like The Simpsons. The simplicity actually became part of the show's charm. Let's talk about something that happened behind the scenes during the show's peak years. The writing room had a very specific creative process that sounds almost ritualistic. Every morning, the writers would gather and pitch random ideas, no matter how weird or nonsensical they seemed. These brainstorming sessions could last for hours, with writers building on each other's ideas and creating increasingly elaborate scenarios. Many of the show's most memorable moments came from these spontaneous creative explosions. Here's something about the show's cultural impact that's pretty remarkable. Family Guy has been translated into dozens of languages and airs in over 100 countries worldwide. But here's the interesting part. Different countries have different censorship standards, so episodes are often edited differently depending on where they're broadcast. Some countries remove certain religious references, others cut violent scenes, and some even change dialogue to make cultural references more relevant to local audiences. The merchandising aspect of Family Guy is another fascinating rabbit hole. The show has spawned everything from action figures to breakfast cereals to mobile games, but one of the most successful merchandise lines has been the talking Stewie dolls, which were initially rejected by toy companies because they thought parents wouldn't want their children playing with a toy that made sarcastic and sometimes inappropriate comments. When they finally got produced, they became one of the best-selling animated character toys of the early 2000s. Let's drift into some trivia about the show's music. Family Guy features more original songs than most animated series, and many of them have become surprisingly popular. The song Shapoopy from the episode Mission Impossible actually led to increased sales of the original 1,957 Broadway recording. Seth MacFarlane's love of classic American standards heavily influences the show's musical choices, and he often uses the characters to perform songs from the Great American Songbook. Here's something that might help you fall asleep. The show's approach to continuity is intentionally loose and dreamlike. Unlike shows that maintain strict chronological order and character development, Family Guy treats each episode almost like a separate universe. Characters die and come back, relationships reset, and events from previous episodes are often ignored completely. This was a deliberate creative choice to give writers maximum freedom to tell whatever story they wanted without being constrained by what happened before. The show's relationship with controversy has always been complex and evolving. What started as boundary-pushing humor that felt fresh and daring gradually shifted over the years, sometimes crossing lines that made even longtime fans uncomfortable. The writers have acknowledged this evolution, often using the show itself to comment on its own controversial moments. It's like the show became self-aware of its own reputation and started having conversations with its critics through the episodes themselves. As we drift toward the end of our random fact journey, here's something particularly interesting about Family Guy's place in animation history. The show arrived at a perfect moment when adult animation was just beginning to find its footing as a legitimate television genre. The Simpsons had proven that cartoons could be sophisticated and satirical, South Park had shown they could be provocative and current, and Family Guy carved out its own niche by being rapid-fire and referential in ways that felt uniquely modern. The show's influence on internet culture cannot be overstated. Long before social media memes became a cultural phenomenon, Family Guy was creating bite-sized moments of humor that people would quote and reference online. The cutaway gags, in particular, felt perfectly suited to the short attention spans and random humor that would later dominate platforms like YouTube and TikTok. In many ways, Family Guy predicted the kind of humor that would thrive in the digital age. So, as you settle into sleep tonight, remember that Family Guy represents something larger than just an animated sitcom. It's a cultural artifact that captured a specific moment in entertainment history. When television was becoming more experimental, audiences were hungry for edgier content, and creators were learning to navigate the balance between pushing boundaries and maintaining mass appeal. The show's journey from cancellation to revival to cultural phenomenon mirrors the changing landscape of television itself. Sweet dreams, and may your sleep be filled with random cutaway gags and the gentle sound of Peter Griffin's distinctive laugh echoing through your subconscious. These random facts about Family Guy have hopefully given your mind something to wander through as you drift off, proving that even animated chaos can become oddly soothing when filtered through the lens of curiosity and nostalgia. Did you know that Family Guy was actually canceled twice, and that Seth MacFarlane almost died in the September 11th attacks but missed his flight because of a hangover? And that's just scratching the surface of the absolutely wild behind-the-scenes stories that most people have never heard about this iconic show. What's up, everyone, and welcome back to the channel, where we dive deep into the hidden secrets of your favorite shows. Today, we're exploring some absolutely mind-blowing Family Guy lore that even die-hard fans probably don't know about. Trust me, by the end of this video, you'll never look at Peter Griffin the same way again. But before we jump into these crazy stories, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because we're constantly dropping content about your favorite animated series that you won't find anywhere else. And if you're a true Family Guy fan, drop a chicken fight emoji in the comments right now. Let's start with something that literally changed the course of television history. Seth MacFarlane was supposed to be on American Airlines Flight 11 on September 11, 2001. The same flight that crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. The only reason he wasn't on that plane was because he had been out drinking the night before and overslept, missing his flight by just 15 minutes. MacFarlane has talked about this in interviews, describing how his travel agent called him frantically when she realized what had happened. Can you imagine how different the world of animation would be today if he had made that flight? No Family Guy revival, no American Dad, no The Orville. It's one of those sliding doors moments that completely altered entertainment history. Speaking of near-death experiences, did you know that Family Guy has been canceled not once, but twice? The show originally ran from 1999 to 2002 before Fox pulled the plug due to declining ratings. But here's where it gets interesting. The show found new life through DVD sales and reruns on Cartoon Network's Adult Swim block. The DVD sales were absolutely unprecedented for an animated series at the time. We're talking about millions of copies sold, which was unheard of for a canceled TV show. Adult Swim's late-night reruns were pulling in massive audiences, often outperforming the original Fox broadcasts. The demand became so overwhelming that Fox had no choice but to bring the show back in 2005. But the cancellation drama didn't end there. In 2007, Fox canceled the show again, this time after Season 5. Once again, fan outcry and continued strong performance in syndication forced the network's hand, and they renewed it for a 6th season. It's pretty incredible when you think about it. Family Guy might be the only show in television history to be saved by its fans twice. Now, let's talk about some character secrets that will blow your mind. Stewie Griffin's sexuality has been a topic of debate for years. But Seth MacFarlane actually revealed in interviews that Stewie was originally conceived as a completely straight character who would eventually grow up to be a normal heterosexual adult. The gay undertones that fans picked up on were never intentionally written into the character initially. However, MacFarlane later embraced the ambiguity and has said that Stewie exists in a kind of pre-sexual state where his eventual orientation is deliberately left unclear. This explains why sometimes Stewie seems attracted to women, sometimes to men, and sometimes to neither. It's a fascinating example of how a character can evolve beyond their creator's original intentions. Here's something that might surprise you about Brian Griffin. He was almost killed off permanently way before that infamous Thanksgiving episode where he actually died temporarily. In the early seasons, there were multiple discussions about removing Brian from the show entirely because some writers felt his character was becoming too preachy and unlikable. The writers experimented with making Brian more flawed and hypocritical to balance out his intellectual pretensions, which is why we see him become increasingly alcoholic and self-absorbed as the series progresses. This character development wasn't accidental. It was a deliberate attempt to make him more interesting and less of a mouthpiece for liberal talking points. Let's dive into some voice acting secrets that most people don't know about. Seth MacFarlane voices 4 main characters: Peter, Brian, Stewie, and Glenn Quagmire. Seth, but he also voices dozens of minor characters throughout the series. However, there are some characters he refuses to voice himself. For example, MacFarlane has stated that he deliberately doesn't voice any of the female characters because he believes women should voice female characters whenever possible. This is why actors like Alex Borstein voice Lois and Mila Kunis voices Meg. It's a surprisingly progressive stance for a show that often gets criticized for its treatment of female characters. Speaking of Meg, here's some dark lore about America's least favorite animated teenager. The character was originally supposed to be much more popular and central to the show's dynamic. In early concept art and scripts, Meg was portrayed as a typical popular high school girl who would serve as the voice of reason in the Griffin family. However, the writers quickly discovered that it was much funnier to make her the family scapegoat and punching bag. What started as occasional jokes about Meg being unpopular gradually evolved into the running gag where literally everyone treats her terribly. The writers have admitted that they sometimes feel bad about how mean the show is to Meg, but the jokes are just too funny to stop. Here's a piece of lore that connects to real-world tragedy. The show has made several references to Conway Twitty, the country singer, usually by cutting away to him performing full songs as a way to pad the episode runtime. These cutaway gags became a running joke about lazy writing and time filling. However, there's a darker story behind this. Conway Twitty died in 1993, years before Family Guy even existed. Seth MacFarlane has revealed that the Conway Twitty gags were actually inspired by his own father's love of the singer's music. MacFarlane's father would play Conway Twitty songs constantly when Seth was growing up, and the extended musical cutaways were a way of honoring that memory, while also poking fun at television's tendency to use musical performances as filler. Let's talk about some episodes that almost didn't make it to air. The episode titled Partial Terms of Endearment was actually banned from broadcast television entirely. The episode deals with abortion and surrogate pregnancy in typical Family Guy fashion, but the content was deemed too controversial for Fox's standards. The episode was completely finished and was supposed to air during Season 8, but Fox refused to broadcast it. It was eventually included on the DVD release and made available online, but it remains the only Family Guy episode that has never aired on television in the United States. The controversy surrounding this episode led to stricter content guidelines for the show going forward. Here's something about the show's animation that most people never notice. In the early seasons, the animation style was much more crude and simple, partly due to budget constraints, but also because of the technology available at the time. However, if you watch closely, you'll notice that the animation quality suddenly improves dramatically around Season 4. This wasn't just because of increased budget, it was because the show switched animation studios. The original episodes were animated by a small studio that specialized in low-budget television animation. When the show was revived, Fox invested in higher quality animation produced by a different studio with more advanced technology and techniques. But here's the weird part. Some fans actually prefer the cruder animation style of the early episodes. They argue that the rougher animation gave the show more character and charm. The newer episodes, while technically superior, sometimes feel too polished and corporate compared to the scrappy early seasons. Let's explore some celebrity connections that might surprise you. Patrick Stewart, who voices baby Susie Swanson, actually improvises most of his lines. The writers typically give him a basic outline of what the character needs to say, but Stewart adds his own Shakespearean flair to every line reading. Stewart has said in interviews that voicing a baby character allows him to explore comedy in ways that his serious dramatic roles don't permit. He's also revealed that he often comes up with the most outrageous and inappropriate lines for baby Susie, pushing the boundaries of what the censors will allow. Here's some lore about the show's most controversial episodes. The episode where Brian and Stewie are trapped in a bank vault together for the entire episode was actually written as a bottle episode to save money on animation and voice acting. However, it ended up becoming one of the most critically acclaimed episodes in the show's history. The writers have revealed that they were initially worried the episode would be boring since it only featured 2 characters in one location for the entire runtime. But the episode's success proved that the show worked best when it focused on character development and dialogue rather than just rapid-fire jokes and cutaway gags. Speaking of experimental episodes, did you know that the show has done several episodes that exist in alternate universes or different time periods? These aren't just random creative choices. They're actually part of a larger multiverse concept that the writers have been quietly building throughout the series. The writers have hinted that all of these alternate reality episodes are connected, and that there's a larger mythology about parallel dimensions that runs throughout the show. Most fans don't pick up on these connections because they're subtle and spread across multiple seasons, but dedicated viewers have started mapping out the multiverse timeline. Here's something about the show's music that most people don't realize. Seth MacFarlane is actually a trained singer and musician who has released several albums of standards and jazz music. Many of the musical numbers in Family Guy feature MacFarlane's actual singing voice, not just his character voices. MacFarlane has said that he uses Family Guy as a way to showcase different musical styles and pay homage to classic American songwriting. Some of the show's most elaborate musical sequences were specifically designed to highlight MacFarlane's vocal abilities and his love of traditional pop music. But here's the interesting part. MacFarlane has also revealed that he sometimes writes entire episodes around songs he wants to perform. The plot becomes secondary to the musical numbers, which explains why some episodes feel like they're structured more like variety shows than traditional sitcoms. Let's talk about some behind-the-scenes drama that most fans don't know about. There have been several major conflicts between the voice actors over the years, particularly regarding salary negotiations and creative control. The most significant dispute involved Mila Kunis, who voices Meg. During Season 7, there were reports that Kunis was considering leaving the show due to disagreements about her character's treatment and her compensation compared to other cast members. The situation was eventually resolved, but it led to changes in how Meg was written in subsequent seasons. Here's some dark lore about the show's influence on real-world events. Several episodes of Family Guy have been accused of predicting or inspiring real-world tragedies. The most notable example is an Innuendo episode that aired before the Boston Marathon bombing that featured Peter accidentally detonating bombs in Boston. The episode was pulled from reruns and streaming services after the bombing, and some conspiracy theorists claimed that the show somehow predicted the attack. Seth MacFarlane has addressed these claims, explaining that they're purely coincidental and that the show's writers don't have any special knowledge of future events. However, this incident led to increased scrutiny of the show's content and more careful consideration of how certain jokes and storylines might be interpreted in different contexts. Here's something about the show's international versions that might surprise you. Family Guy has been adapted for television in several different countries, and each version makes significant changes to accommodate local culture and censorship standards. The most interesting adaptation is probably the Arabic version, which removes all alcohol references, changes Brian from a dog to a cat, and significantly tones down the sexual humor. These changes are so extensive that the show becomes almost unrecognizable compared to the American version. As we wrap up this deep dive into Family Guy lore, it's clear that there's so much more to this show than meets the eye. From near-death experiences that changed television history to hidden multiverses and banned episodes, Family Guy has one of the richest and most complex backstories in animated television. These behind-the-scenes stories remind us that even our favorite comedies have real human drama and complexity behind them. The next time you watch Family Guy, you'll hopefully have a new appreciation for all the creative decisions, controversies, and coincidences that shape the show we know today. If you enjoyed learning about these hidden Family Guy secrets, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into your favorite shows. What other animated series would you like us to explore next? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next video, where we uncover even more secrets from the world of animation. Have you ever wondered what happens when your favorite animated characters don't just get blown up for laughs, but actually stay dead? Well, grab a cup of warm milk and get comfortable, because tonight we're diving deep into the surprisingly dark world of Family Guy's permanently deceased characters. And trust me, some of these deaths will shock you more than Peter's latest workplace accident. Now, before we start counting bodies, let's be real about something. Family Guy isn't exactly known for its restraint when it comes to cartoon violence. Characters get flattened, exploded, and dismembered on a weekly basis only to magically appear in the next scene like nothing happened. But every once in a while, the Grim Reaper actually keeps his receipts, and these characters never bounce back. Some were killed because fans couldn't stand them, others because their voice actors passed away in real life, and a few just got caught in the crossfire of Seth MacFarlane's twisted sense of humor. So dim those lights, settle into your most comfortable position, and let's explore every character that Family Guy has permanently sent to the great cartoon afterlife. Starting with the very first casualty that taught us this show wasn't messing around when it came to consequences. Our journey begins with Mr. Weed, Peter's original boss at the Happy-Go-Lucky Toy Factory. This man first graced our screens way back in the pilot episode, catching Peter dead drunk at his workstation because apparently showing up sober was too much to ask. Mr. Weed was everything you'd expect from a factory supervisor dealing with Peter Griffin as an employee. Stern, professional, and probably questioning every career choice that led him to that moment. What made Mr. Weed fascinating wasn't just his no-nonsense attitude, but the running joke about his suspiciously theatrical mannerisms. The show never explicitly confirmed anything about his personal life, but his fabulous gestures and dramatic flair became a subtle recurring gag. Despite Peter's constant screw-ups, Mr. Weed kept giving him second chances, firing and rehiring him like it was some kind of workplace hobby. The irony is that this unusual loyalty to Peter ultimately sealed his fate. In the episode where everything went wrong, Peter decided to invite his boss over for dinner to make a good impression. Surprisingly, the evening started perfectly. Mr. Weed was genuinely impressed by Peter's home, family, and even Brian's ability to speak. He was so impressed that he offered Peter a promotion to head of toy development. That's when dinner took a deadly turn. Brian, shocked by this unexpected good news, started choking on a dinner roll. When Peter and Lois performed the Heimlich maneuver, the roll shot out of Brian's mouth like a projectile and landed directly in Mr. Weed's throat. And unlike the countless other times characters have faced mortal peril in this show, Mr. Weed actually died from choking. The funeral scene was classic Family Guy darkness. Mr. Weed left behind a videotaped will announcing that the Happy-Go-Lucky Toy Factory would be demolished to make way for something called the Homoerotic Toy Factory. It was absurd, tragic, and weirdly fitting for a character whose sexuality had been a running gag throughout his appearances. Moving from workplace fatalities to relationship drama, let's talk about Loretta Brown, Cleveland's ex-wife, who met her end in a way that perfectly summarized her entire character arc. Loretta was everything Cleveland wasn't. Where he was calm and soft-spoken, she was loud, demanding, and took no prisoners when it came to getting what she wanted. Their marriage started cracking when Quagmire's infamous inability to control himself led to an affair. During a fishing trip, a fish accidentally landed on Loretta's chest, and she took it as some kind of cosmic sign to sleep with the guy who caught it. Classic Family Guy logic, really. When Peter and Brian discovered this affair, they recognized Quagmire by his distinctive tattoo, leading to the most awkward revelation scene in television history. Cleveland's reaction to learning about the betrayal was so pathetically calm that it almost hurt to watch. Instead of rage or dramatic confrontation, he just apologized and accepted being kicked out of his own home. It wasn't until Peter and Lois called him out for being too passive that Cleveland finally found his spine and went after Quagmire. After their divorce was finalized, Loretta lived alone in a house on the hill, which sounds poetic until you remember this is Family Guy, and nothing stays peaceful for long. Her death came during one of Peter's elaborate pranks that somehow always managed to destroy Cleveland's property. This time, instead of Cleveland surviving the chaos like usual, Loretta got caught in the destruction and was crushed by falling debris. The reason behind Loretta's permanent exit was actually practical rather than narrative. Her voice actress, Alex Borstein, who also voices Lois, found Loretta's gravelly voice too difficult and painful to perform. Rather than recast the character, the writers decided to kill her off permanently, which honestly feels like the most Family Guy solution possible. Speaking of deaths that came out of nowhere, Horace's demise was particularly heartbreaking for fans of the Drunken Clam. This guy had been serving drinks to Peter, Quagmire, Joe, and Cleveland since the early seasons, surviving multiple near-death experiences that should have killed any normal bartender. He'd been shot, knocked unconscious, and even survived a fire, leading viewers to believe he was practically immortal. His luck finally ran out during a softball game between the Drunken Clam and Goldman's Pharmacy. Jerome, brought in as a ringer for Mort's team, was at bat when Horace tried to strike him out. Instead of a strikeout, Horace got struck down permanently. The episode revealed his death so casually that it almost felt cruel. But that's exactly the kind of dark humor Family Guy specializes in. The aftermath was even more devastating. The Drunken Clam was set to close permanently, which would have destroyed one of the show's most important locations. Peter tried everything to save the bar, but it was Jerome himself, the man who accidentally killed Horace, who stepped up to buy the establishment and keep it running. It was a surprisingly touching resolution to a tragic situation. Now let's talk about Peter's father, or at least the man he thought was his father for most of his life. Francis Griffin was the embodiment of strict Irish Catholic values, taken to an uncomfortable extreme. His dislike of Lois simply because she was Protestant created constant family tension, and his general disappointment in Peter was palpable in every scene they shared. When Francis retired and moved in with the Griffin family, he transformed their home into what looked like a Catholic gift shop explosion. Crucifixes appeared in every room. Religious imagery covered the walls, and the atmosphere became so oppressive that Peter actually convinced the Pope to visit and talk some sense into his father. The fact that Francis accused the Pope of going soft tells you everything you need to know about his personality. Francis met his end during Meg's birthday party, which was already going poorly because Peter was, as usual, being a complete embarrassment. While attempting one of his signature stupid stunts, Peter accidentally caused an accident that put Francis in the hospital. On his deathbed, Francis had some final words for his son that were both cruel and oddly accurate. He called Peter a fat, stinking drunk, which honestly wasn't wrong, but the timing made it particularly harsh. The revelation that Francis wasn't even Peter's biological father came during therapy sessions afterward. Peter discovered his real father was an Irishman named Mickey McFinnigan, who only accepted Peter after he proved himself in a drinking contest. It was a twisted validation of everything Francis had criticized about Peter's character. Peter's mother, Thelma Griffin, also received the permanent death treatment, though her passing was handled with less dramatic flair. She died of a stroke at the beginning of an episode that quickly shifted focus to Peter getting involved with an older woman, which was weird timing even by Family Guy standards. Thelma had always been a complex character, technically nicer than Francis, but carrying her own set of serious problems. She was a smoker, gambler, and alcoholic who had created several traumatic childhood memories for Peter through her neglectful and sometimes abusive behavior. Her habit of dropping bombshells on Peter whenever she visited made every appearance feel like an emotional landmine. The most shocking revelation came when Peter needed his birth certificate and discovered he wasn't born in America, but in Mexico. Thelma had gone there to terminate her pregnancy after learning Peter's real father was an Irish drunk, but changed her mind after giving birth and smuggled baby Peter back to the United States. She then married Francis to give Peter a father figure, creating the lie that lasted Peter's entire childhood. Moving into the realm of characters that almost nobody mourned, Doug's death was announced so casually that it felt like an afterthought. This preschool rival of Stewie's had been a thorn in the baby's side for multiple episodes, representing everything Stewie hated about other children his age. Their rivalry started over playground politics and escalated into full-scale warfare, complete with campaign strategies and political maneuvering when Doug ran unopposed for snack captain. Stewie's terror at the thought of Doug gaining any kind of political experience, even at the preschool level, led to some of the show's most absurd storylines involving toddler espionage and election fraud. The episode ended with Stewie wearing the snack captain hat and casually mentioning that Doug had died in a commuter plane crash that morning. The matter-of-fact delivery and complete lack of emotional response from anyone made it clear that Doug's death was meant to be darkly comedic rather than tragic. Fans were actually relieved to see the annoying character permanently removed from the show. Bertram's death was far more dramatic and tied into one of Family Guy's most science fiction-heavy storylines. As Stewie's artificially conceived half-brother, Bertram represented a legitimate threat to Stewie's intellectual supremacy and served as his most formidable opponent throughout multiple episodes. Their first encounter inside Peter's reproductive system established them as equals in terms of intelligence and ruthlessness. After forming a temporary alliance based on their mutual hatred of Lois, the two babies eventually turned on each other in a conflict that escalated beyond playground politics into actual warfare involving time travel and assassination attempts. Bertram's master plan involved traveling back in time to eliminate one of Stewie's ancestors, Leonardo da Vinci, thereby erasing Stewie from existence entirely. The fact that he actually succeeded in killing Da Vinci showed just how dangerous and competent Bertram could be when properly motivated. However, Stewie proved to be the superior strategist by tracking Bertram down through time and ending their rivalry permanently. The execution scene, where Stewie asks Bertram about his favorite bottled water before killing him, demonstrated the cold calculation that made Stewie such a compelling character. Unlike Doug's casual disposal, Bertram's death felt earned through multiple episodes of build-up and character development. The double murder episode stands out as one of Family Guy's most ambitious attempts at sustained storytelling across a full episode length. The mystery dinner party format allowed the writers to eliminate multiple characters while providing entertainment value through the whodunit structure. Muriel Goldman's death during this episode felt particularly cruel because she had never been anything more than a background character who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. As Mort's wife, she was essentially a female version of his neurotic personality, which made their relationship believable but didn't give her much individual characterization. The revelation that she had been exchanging mysterious messages with James Woods created false suspense about her potential involvement in the murders, but she was ultimately just another victim caught up in someone else's revenge scheme. Her funeral scene showed how little impact she had made on the community, with even her husband and son seeming relatively unaffected by her death. Diane Simmons represented the episode's true villain and most shocking revelation. As Tom Tucker's longtime co-anchor, she had been a background presence for years without showing any signs of homicidal tendencies. Her transformation from professional newswoman to calculating murderer demonstrated how deeply personal rejections and professional disappointments could push someone over the edge. The motive behind her killing spree was painfully relatable in its pettiness. Being dumped by James Woods for a younger woman and facing replacement by a younger co-anchor as she turned 40 created the perfect storm of humiliation and desperation. Her methodical approach to framing Tom Tucker for the murders showed intelligence and planning that made her genuinely dangerous. Diane's final confrontation with Lois provided the classic villain monologue moment where all her motivations were revealed. The irony of being killed by Stewie, a baby, after successfully eliminating multiple adult targets added the kind of dark humor that Family Guy specialized in creating. Patty Tanager's death was perhaps the most satisfying for viewers who had endured his annoying catchphrase and constant attempts to start fights over nothing. This short, aggressive man represented everything irritating about people who create drama where none needs to exist. His role as the boss of a car dealership where Brian worked temporarily showed that his obnoxious personality wasn't limited to casual encounters. Even in professional settings, he couldn't resist making inappropriate comments and stirring up unnecessary conflict with his employees and customers. The poetic justice of his death came when he tried to start a fight with someone operating a military tank. His final words, maintaining his catchphrase even while facing certain doom, showed that he was committed to his obnoxious personality right until the end. The audience's reaction to his death was overwhelmingly positive, proving that sometimes characters are specifically designed to be eliminated. The deaths of Angela and Mayor Adam West carried more emotional weight because they were tied to the real-life passing of their voice actors. These weren't creative decisions made for storyline purposes, but necessary responses to losing the talented people who brought these characters to life. Angela's character arc, from hostile supervisor to lonely woman seeking connection, provided some of Peter's most uncomfortable workplace storylines. Her sexual harassment of Peter while threatening his job security created situations that were both comedically awkward and genuinely problematic by today's standards. Her backstory, revealing years of loneliness and isolation, made her desperate actions more understandable without excusing them. The resolution where Peter dresses up to take her on a fake date showed his capacity for kindness even when dealing with someone who had made his life difficult. Carrie Fisher's death in real life meant that Angela's character had to be written out permanently. The funeral scene in her honor served as both a farewell to the character and a tribute to the actress who had voiced her. Peter's mistake of ending up at the wrong funeral added typical Family Guy humor to what was otherwise a genuinely touching moment. Mayor Adam West's death marked the end of one of the show's most beloved recurring characters. His wonderfully insane personality and possibly corrupt political practices had provided countless moments of absurd humor throughout his long tenure as Quahog's mayor. The real Adam West's connection to his animated counterpart made the character feel more authentic and grounded despite his completely unrealistic behavior and dialogue. His brief challenge from Lois during her political phase showed that even incompetent leadership was preferable to the corruption that inevitably followed. His marriage to Carol Pewterschmidt, Lois's sister, created additional family connections that made his death more personally impactful for the main characters. The tribute episode where Brian petitioned to rename the high school after Mayor West provided proper closure for a character who had been part of the show's fabric for over 16 seasons. The ghost appearance at the end where Mayor West saves Brian from falling off a cliff gave the character one final moment of heroism and showed that death couldn't completely remove him from the Family Guy universe. His replacement by Wild West as mayor acknowledged that the character was irreplaceable while allowing the show to continue. These permanent deaths in Family Guy serve multiple purposes beyond simple shock value. They demonstrate that actions can have genuine consequences, even in a cartoon universe known for its resurrection-running gags. Some characters were eliminated because they had served their narrative purpose, others because fan reaction made their continued presence counterproductive, and some because real-world circumstances forced the writers' hands. The variety in how these deaths were handled shows the range of Family Guy's storytelling capabilities, from casual mentions that treat death as an afterthought to elaborate murder mystery episodes that build tension across an entire episode. The show has found multiple ways to permanently remove characters while maintaining its signature dark humor. The emotional impact of these deaths varies significantly based on character development and audience attachment. Long-running characters like Mayor West and Horace created genuine sadness among fans, while annoying characters like Doug and Patty Tanager were celebrated in their passing. This range of reactions demonstrates how effectively the show had developed distinct personalities for even its minor recurring characters. What makes these permanent deaths particularly interesting is how they contrast with Family Guy's usual approach to cartoon violence. The show regularly features deaths that are immediately reversed or ignored, making the permanent ones stand out as genuinely significant events. When a character stays dead in this universe, it carries extra weight, because viewers know it's not the norm. The practical reasons behind some of these deaths, such as voice actor availability or fan reaction, show how external factors can influence creative decisions in long-running animated series. The writers have generally handled these necessary eliminations with appropriate respect while maintaining the show's comedic tone. Looking back at this collection of permanently deceased characters reveals the evolution of Family Guy's storytelling over its many seasons. Earlier deaths, like Mr. Weed were often accidental consequences of the show's chaotic humor, while later deaths, like those in the murder mystery episode, showed more deliberate narrative planning. The show's willingness to permanently eliminate characters demonstrates confidence in its ability to create new sources of humor and conflict without relying on the same recurring personalities indefinitely. This creative flexibility has helped Family Guy maintain freshness across its extended run, while still honoring the contributions of departed characters. These deaths also serve as reminders that even in the most outrageous fictional universes, some actions cannot be undone. They provide moments of genuine consequence in a show that otherwise operates on cartoon logic, where nothing permanent ever happens to the main characters. So there you have it, fellow Insomniacs and Family Guy enthusiasts. A complete tour through the surprisingly extensive graveyard of characters who didn't make it back from their final Family Guy appearances. From workplace accidents to murder mysteries, from natural causes to tank-related incidents, the show has found creative ways to permanently remove characters while maintaining its signature blend of dark humor and unexpected heart. Sweet dreams, and remember, in the world of Family Guy, even cartoon death can sometimes be permanent. Hey there, sleep seekers and Family Guy fans. Ever lie awake wondering just how many ridiculous jobs Peter Griffin has actually had throughout the series? Well, grab your pillow and get comfortable, because we're about to dive into the wonderfully chaotic career history of Quahog's most incompetent resident. From safety inspector to Supreme Court justice, Peter's resume reads like a fever dream, and tonight we're exploring every single bizarre position this man has somehow managed to stumble into. Picture this. You're at a job interview, and they ask where you see yourself in 5 years. Most people have a reasonable answer. Peter Griffin? Well, let's just say his interview skills are about as polished as his decision-making abilities. Yet somehow, this man has held more jobs than most people even know exist. Tonight's journey through Peter's professional mishaps is perfect for those late-night moments when you need something absurdly entertaining to drift off to. Let's start with what might be considered Peter's most stable employment, though that's not saying much. His original gig as a safety inspector at the Happy-Go-Lucky Toy Factory sounds straightforward enough. Stand around, inspect toys, make sure they're safe for children. Simple, right? Wrong. This is Peter Griffin we're talking about. Even the most basic task becomes an opportunity for spectacular failure. The man whose job it was to ensure toy safety somehow found ways to make everything less safe just by being there. From toy inspection, Peter moved on to what became his longest-running employment adventure, working at the Pawtucket Brewery. Now, there's something almost poetic about Peter working at the place where his beloved Pawtucket Patriot Ale is crafted. It's like a beer enthusiast getting a job at their favorite brewery, except instead of bringing passion and expertise to the role, Peter brought his unique talent for turning any situation into chaos. On his very first day, he managed to get drunk during work hours, setting the tone for what would become years of questionable workplace behavior. The medical field has also been graced by Peter's presence, though patients probably weren't thrilled about it. During a citywide flu outbreak, when the hospital was desperately short-staffed, Peter volunteered as a nurse. This might seem noble until you discover his approach to medical care. Turns out, Peter had been faking his way through nursing duties because he was afraid of needles. Imagine being sick in the hospital and finding out your nurse has been pretending to give you medication because he's squeamish about basic medical equipment. But Peter's medical career didn't end with nursing. He somehow also worked as a doctor, which raises serious questions about the hospital's hiring practices. His approach to emergency medicine was about as effective as you'd expect. When someone's life hung in the balance, Peter's solution involved methods that would make actual medical professionals question their career choices. Law enforcement has also experienced the Peter Griffin effect. In one memorable stint, he became a sheriff in a small southern town after the Griffin family was relocated by the FBI. The job description perfectly matched Peter's skill set: hang out, eat pie, and get drunk. For once, Peter had found employment that aligned with his natural abilities. Of course, even the simplest law enforcement duties became complicated when filtered through Peter's unique worldview. His artistic side emerged when he worked as a police sketch artist. While most people struggled with Peter's unconventional artistic interpretations, his sketches turned out to be surprisingly accurate. Sometimes, Raw talent manifests in the most unexpected ways, even when that talent belongs to someone who approaches every task with the subtlety of a freight train. Peter has also dabbled in hospitality, working as a motel housekeeper. His customer service approach involved inserting himself into situations where he absolutely wasn't welcome, demonstrating a complete lack of understanding about personal boundaries and professional behavior. Guests probably didn't expect their housekeeper to become an active participant in their private moments. The detective business got a taste of Peter's investigative skills when he worked as a private investigator. His noir-style internal monologue painted him as a hard-boiled detective struggling to make ends meet, but his actual investigative methods were about as sophisticated as his approach to everything else. Still, there's something charming about Peter's attempt to channel classic detective fiction, even if the execution left much to be desired. Peter's relationship with food has led to several career opportunities. He became president of the National Association for the Advancement of Fat People, turning his personal struggles with weight into a leadership role. This position actually led to some heroic moments, proving that even Peter's most self-serving endeavors can occasionally produce positive outcomes. The fishing industry experienced Peter's unique management style when he decided to become a professional fisherman. Despite having zero experience on the water, Peter approached commercial fishing with his characteristic confidence. His nautical adventures proved that enthusiasm alone isn't enough to master the complexities of maritime work, especially when that enthusiasm is accompanied by a complete lack of relevant skills. Agriculture also felt Peter's impact when he tried his hand at farming. Moving the family to the countryside for a simpler life seemed like a reasonable plan until reality set in. Farming requires knowledge, patience, and hard work, qualities that don't align with Peter's approach to life. The fact that they failed to grow a single sellable crop shouldn't surprise anyone familiar with Peter's track record. Education has been both blessed and cursed by Peter's involvement. He served as an interim principal at James Woods High, stepping in during a staffing crisis. While his administrative methods were unconventional, he did manage some positive moments, like standing up to bullies. However, his interpretation of appropriate principal behavior included outdated social media challenges and questionable disciplinary approaches. Peter also won a campaign to become school board president, though his victory came through a smear campaign against his own wife. His tenure in educational leadership was marked by the same chaos that characterizes all his endeavors, proving that putting Peter in charge of anything, especially children's education, requires a level of optimism that borders on delusion. The restaurant business has provided Peter with multiple opportunities to combine his love of food with his entrepreneurial spirit. He and Lois opened Big Pete's House of Munch, using money from a valuable coin they discovered. Restaurant ownership taught Peter that loving food and successfully serving it to customers are entirely different skills. The establishment struggled from day one, with Peter's customer service philosophy clashing with basic business principles. Not content with traditional restaurants, Peter also operated a food truck called Eat My Junk. His mobile food service brought his unique culinary vision directly to the streets, complete with creative payment processing methods that probably violated several health and business regulations. The food truck experiment demonstrated that changing venues doesn't necessarily improve outcomes when the fundamental approach remains chaotic. Environmental activism became Peter's focus when he created Gary, the no-trash cougar, a character designed to combat pollution. His environmental education methods were somewhat traumatic for young audiences, proving that good intentions don't automatically translate to effective execution. Sometimes the message gets lost when the messenger approaches their mission with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. Law enforcement experienced Peter's unique perspective again when he volunteered as a cop during a staffing shortage. Giving Peter police powers was probably one of Quahog's more questionable decisions. His interpretation of police work involved creative approaches to evidence handling and suspect interaction that would make actual officers reconsider their career choices. Corporate leadership has also been shaped by Peter's influence. When he temporarily took over as CEO of his father-in-law's company, his business philosophy involved firing experienced executives and replacing them with his drinking buddies. His product development ideas were equally revolutionary, though perhaps not in ways that traditional business schools would recommend. The tobacco industry briefly benefited from Peter's advocacy when he served as president of El Dorado Cigarette Company. His approach to corporate leadership in this role was refreshingly straightforward. Show up, sit in the office, and use his position to influence legislation. Sometimes the simplest job descriptions are the most honest. Political service has called upon Peter's talents multiple times. He worked as a press secretary, though his duties seemed to focus more on preventing static electricity than managing media relations. His understanding of political communication was about as nuanced as his approach to everything else, which is to say, not very nuanced at all. The entertainment industry has provided Peter with various opportunities to showcase his talents. He worked as a Calvin Klein model at some point in his past, proving that even Peter's physical appearance has commercial value under the right circumstances. He's also appeared in television commercials, though his performance skills might not lead to repeat bookings. Military service appears somewhere in Peter's background, though his understanding of combat protocols and chain of command was typically unconventional. His military training focused on identifying friendly forces, a concept he struggled to grasp despite repeated instruction. Telecommunications offered Peter work in telemarketing, though his target demographic was somewhat specialized. His phone skills were about as effective as you'd expect, with customer interaction following his usual pattern of creating confusion where none previously existed. Medical experimentation provided Peter with income opportunities when he volunteered for various research studies. The compensation was decent, though the side effects of participating in multiple experiments simultaneously probably weren't covered in the consent forms he definitely didn't read carefully. The hospitality industry experienced Peter's customer service philosophy when he worked various service positions. His approach to taking orders involved creative interpretations of restaurant terminology that probably confused both customers and kitchen staff. His ability to remember and accurately communicate simple requests was challenged by his tendency to overcomplicate straightforward interactions. Emergency services have been both helped and hindered by Peter's involvement. His stint as a firefighter demonstrated that good intentions and basic safety training don't always combine effectively. Sometimes the person meant to solve the problem becomes part of the problem, especially when that person approaches emergency response with Peter's unique logic. Entertainment production has benefited from Peter's creative vision. He developed television programming with the same innovative approach he brings to everything else. His understanding of audience preferences and production logistics was typically unconventional, resulting in content that probably challenged viewers' expectations in unexpected ways. Transportation services experienced Peter's customer service approach when he worked as an Uber driver. His vehicle, the situation was unconventional, and his interpersonal skills with passengers followed his established pattern of creating memorable experiences for all the wrong reasons. The pharmaceutical industry relied on Peter's expertise when he worked as a pharmacist. His approach to medication distribution and patient consultation demonstrated his unique interpretation of healthcare delivery. Customers probably received more than they bargained for in terms of personalized service. Seasonal employment has provided Peter with opportunities to spread joy as a mall Santa. His interaction with children during the holiday season showcased his gift for making lasting impressions, though not necessarily the kind that parents hope for when they bring their kids to meet Santa. Domestic management became Peter's responsibility when he worked as a house husband. His approach to household organization and family care demonstrated skills that had been hidden beneath years of workplace chaos. Sometimes the right job brings out unexpected competencies, even in the most unlikely candidates. Judicial service elevated Peter to the Supreme Court, where his legal philosophy focused on equality through unconventional means. His approach to constitutional interpretation was characteristically innovative, challenging traditional legal thinking with solutions that probably weren't covered in law school. Specialized services have utilized Peter's unique skill set in various capacities. He's worked as everything from a babysitter to a personal shopper, bringing his distinctive approach to customer service in roles that required sensitivity and attention to detail. His clients probably received more personalized attention than they anticipated. Performance arts have provided Peter with outlets for his creative expression. His musical abilities have earned him income through various venues, from street performance to wedding entertainment. His understanding of audience engagement and musical technique follows his established pattern of prioritizing enthusiasm over conventional skill. The food service industry has experienced Peter's influence in multiple capacities, from restaurant ownership to catering services. His culinary philosophy emphasizes creativity over convention, resulting in dining experiences that challenge customers' expectations about food preparation and presentation. Public safety has relied on Peter's expertise in various specialized roles, from ninja police officer to volunteer emergency responder. His approach to crime prevention and emergency management demonstrates innovative thinking that probably wasn't covered in standard training programs. Media production has benefited from Peter's creative vision in multiple formats, from cartoon development to television production. His understanding of entertainment value and audience engagement follows his characteristic approach of prioritizing memorable experiences over conventional quality standards. As we wrap up this extensive journey through Peter Griffin's career history, it's clear that his professional life has been anything but boring. From safety inspector to Supreme Court justice, from nurse to ninja cop, Peter has approached every job with the same combination of enthusiasm and chaos that defines his character. His work history reads like a collection of workplace disasters, yet somehow he keeps finding new employment opportunities. What makes Peter's career journey so entertaining is his complete lack of awareness about his own limitations. He approaches brain surgery with the same confidence he brings to flipping burgers, and somehow manages to create memorable moments in every position he holds. His employers probably don't forget him quickly, though not necessarily for the reasons they'd prefer. The sheer variety of Peter's employment history suggests either an incredibly diverse skill set or an amazing ability to convince people to hire him, despite obvious red flags. The truth is probably somewhere in between, though the evidence strongly suggests that Peter's interview skills don't accurately represent his job performance capabilities. Tonight, as you drift off to sleep, you can rest easy knowing that somewhere in the animated universe, Peter Griffin is probably starting a new job tomorrow, bringing his unique brand of workplace creativity to yet another unsuspecting industry. His career adventures remind us that sometimes the most entertaining stories come from the most unlikely sources, and that competence isn't always required for memorable employment experiences. Sweet dreams, and remember, no matter how chaotic your own work life gets, it's probably more manageable than Peter Griffin's professional journey through the working world of Quahog and beyond.